The views and opinions expressed by the guest author or speaker during this live session are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Reader's Magnet. The content shared is for informational purposes only and does not constitute endorsement or promotion of any particular belief, ideology, or product.
Hello, authors, book lovers, and storytellers. Welcome to the RM Hive. You're tuning into Reader's Magnet's featured author interview. I'm Brittany, and today we are honored to be joined by Robert Brehm, the author of the book entitled The Story Has a Secret. The Story Has a Secret is a powerful therapeutic autobiography which begins with Robert's childhood experience of flying out of a window during a car accident and moves through many meaningful chapters of his life, all the way to the strange and reflective period we've all gone through, right, Robert, during the COVID-19 pandemic. Drawing from his background in psychology, teaching, counseling, and psychodrama, Robert explores the projection errors of the mind that have affected people for centuries. What makes his book especially personal is the way he uses moments from his own life to introduce important psychological concepts and helps readers look at their own memories with deeper understanding. So, Robert, thank you so much for joining us today. We're excited to learn more about your story, your work, and of course, the message that your book holds.
Thank you very much.
So, Robert, before we begin the interview, can you make a quick introduction for yourself?
Yes, I call myself Robert, and last name Brehm, but I'm really not the myth of who I think I am, and I'm probably not the myth of who you think I am. So whatever I say is going to be, I think, clear that I'm not sure either who I am. But basically, uh, I'm a third generation from Europe, from German background, and grandpa came from Russia. So right away, a lot of cultural areas there. Came from a very blue collar family for over 500 years. Everybody was a peasant or a farmer. I'm the first generation that got a university degree. So I
Wow.
pride myself in being an intellectual person, but I can also, of course, relate with people who are not. Um, I'm 86 years old, and I didn't realize I would be writing a book that took me 8 years because I started when I was 72. So anyway, that's if you have questions, that's the way to go, and we'll learn more about me, I think, as we go along.
Yes, yes. I'm very sure that the viewers will be asking you questions. So, Robert, let's begin with your book title. The Story Has a Secret. It's a very intriguing title. For readers who are just discovering your book right now, right here in the RM Hive, what's the story behind the title? Why is it The Story Has a Secret?
That's a very good question. As everyone knows in writing a book, the title is critical. And what does it mean? Well, I could have called it Know Thyself, but that's from Socrates and Greeks a long ways
Oh,
back. So
okay.
I decided that my first problem was what do we title in the book? And I decided, can I make a title that tells us what the book's about just by the cover? Because we often heard, or I've often heard, you can't tell a book by the cover. So I tried to write a book that says you can tell everything by the cover. Now,
Oh,
in simple terms, as a psychologist, what we try to do for the reader is come up with something like a simple profundity. In other words, the title seems so simple that everyone can hear it, but it is extremely complex, and one has to try to work at not seeing the to just keep it very superficial. Another title like it might have been something like "Life is Great, Be Happy." Well, that's a title you can remember, but to the reader, that sounds simple, but it's really deep in its cover. And that's the same there. To the reader, I want the title to sound simple, but to the author, which is me, instead of simple profundity, we call it profound simplicity. We say that we try to make
wow.
all of complexities of life and not undersimplify it, but make it so that the mind can quickly see there's lots of depth in that story. If you just look for a minute, if it says the story has a secret, we have to say, well, for goodness sake, what is the secret?
Yes.
And well, what story are we talking about? So that is like a meme, M-E-M-E. That's kind of a rhyme for a gene. It very quickly, like Richard Dawkins came up, will tell us that that's a word you just can't forget. It just passes on subtly, and you say, my goodness, that's a meme. The story has a secret. And then we get on two words, story and secret, and we go, oh my goodness, secret usually is something that you won't reveal, and it might be nasty or something naughty. But, well, what the story is, oh my, that must be something else. So we say, well, the story represents a storyteller. We say, oh my goodness, the little boy is under the tree there, as we can see in the book. And he's
Yes, it's
all
right there.
about
The book
himself,
cover.
reading about the cover. The story has a secret. And there's more to it, but I thought that would be a quick way to start with the cover.
Yeah. I see a comment here, Robert, from our reviewers, from Susan Hodges. Let me show it on the screen. Do you think the secret in your story is something readers discover on their own or something that reveals itself over time?
I think the answer to that at the end is if you live long enough, 85 to 100, I think you're going to discover your secrets pretty easily. I think genetically we're predisposed to discover our secrets, but I think with experiences of life over and over, they become our memoir. And I do believe we'll discover the secret as we age. It's almost a given. Uh, the story secret is really kind of self knowledge or self criticism or self reflection. So you're right. Over time, we will probably discover our self knowledge. That is, what are our beliefs? What are our feelings? What are
Yes.
our strengths? What are our weaknesses? What is the feedback that people give us about ourselves? So I do believe you're correct. I would like to present an alternative that you don't have to wait till you're my age, 86, in order to discover that the basic principle is in self awareness, in the story of the
Yes.
secret, is we just don't know a lot about our stories.
So basically, Robert, it's all about as the days go by, we will get to know ourselves more. Is that correct?
That's correct. And the
All
self
right.
knowledge is another term for it. The more we
Yes.
have experiences, we either repeat them and then we don't learn much new, or we try something else and we get more self knowledge. So, really,
Yes.
if I were to say it quickly, uh, what it is that our bliss in life leads to fulfillment inevitably if we increase our self knowledge. And my book will show some skills and techniques, plus my own example with myself, which is very complicated.
That's amazing. So, Robert, your book is, as we've talked, is deeply personal and reflective. Can you share your favorite line from your book and tell us, the viewers, why this one is meaningful to you?
Surely, the cover, of course, is one of my favorites, isn't it? I just reviewed that a little. But let's
Mhm.
look at the last poem in the book,
Ooh,
because we want to look at the cover and the last line of a book to know what is the author talking about. So if we look at the last poem in the book, it says, life is but a mirror in whose reflection I see not a myriad of others, but a little bit of me. In
ooh.
order to accept the beauty and perfection afforded by the view, must I not forget about whom I'm speaking? 'Tis me, not you. I think that's a synopsis, and it's kind of simple on the surface, but if we look at it in depth, it's an extremely
Yes.
deep poem.
Yeah, it holds so much meaning when you think about it.
Yeah, exactly. And I tried
So,
to use the best we have in psychology, in philosophy, uh, in this poem that would cover almost, well, I say cover everything that human beings have ever discovered, which ironically is not a lot about
yeah,
themselves.
there's so much more out there or within ourselves.
And then the other
That
line, there's several in there. The other one I like is the
is,
story always represents the storyteller. So any
yes.
author may not say it that direct, but the
Hmm.
author is really, whether it's fiction or reality, I'm not sure what there's a difference. It's the author's presentation indirectly of the author, him or herself. So when we hear that, we can easily say life is rather simple in this sense. If you see I'm 7 foot tall
Mm-hmm.
or 5 foot tall, you're correct if your frame of reference is is based on your own height. Well, that's kind of like life. When I look in a mirror, what I'm going to see is me, my reflection, and nothing else. And that's the premise, like of know thyself, what Socrates was trying to get at.
All right. So, Robert, I see another comment here from our viewers. This one is from Darren Silva. If readers walk away remembering only one idea from your book, what do you hope it is?
Well, I hope it's the word empty chair. And
Empty
the empty
chair.
chair is a therapeutic projection technique like the mirror. That if you will
Okay.
remember the empty chair, that is, put two chairs up and you look and talk to an empty chair, you will have mastered everything we know about human beings by just
Oh,
using the reflection in the empty chair.
okay.
And I give examples in every chapter in the book so that we'll have lots of ideas how to use it. So, yes, I'd say the main thing to remember is an empty chair technique that's designed for your fulfillment and happiness in the world that you live in.
All right. So, Robert, your book also mentions a sequel, right? The Secret in the Story. Are you planning to continue expanding this work or create more books connected to this therapeutic perspective?
That's a good question. I started in 2018. That was my
Wow,
first book.
2018.
And I tried to make it like a child's book or a book
Yes.
that's really uh, ability for fifth graders and up. And then after that book, I got lots of comments from sixth graders, seventh graders that were very positive. And then I moved to the college students, and they began to ask me things like, Robert, what is the secret in your book? And I go,
Yeah.
oh my goodness. So then I developed into an adult level of reading, high school, graduate, or better, that started
Okay.
to help people not have to guess what my secret is, but see if I can formulate what it is. Then, after that sequence occurred, I have lots of people asking me, Robert, for example, the vice president of the bank said, Robert, would you write us a chapter on how people make money? And I gave a synopsis of that. And she said, my goodness, that's amazing. We want to have a chapter written so people would do this. And I write another chapter. So, and I expect to have it finished, I thought, in 2028. So, yes, there should be another revision and a sequel that goes 10 years. And I was hoping that that would cover pretty much this book. But so far, I keep getting more people asking things. And so I have to add another chapter.
Yes. So, you've mentioned there it has a little bit of this and that, right, Robert, your book. So, in creating a book that combines memoir, psychology, and personal reflection, what was one of the most surprising things you learned during your writing process?
Well, believe it or not, as I read it after I finished it, I said, my
Mm-hmm.
goodness, that's an incredibly uh, revealing book. It's telling me about myself I kind of overlooked. And I said, why, for goodness sake, I thought I was writing a book for others. It looks like
Right.
I'm
Writing for you.
reading about myself.
Yeah.
So that was surprising. And there were some other surprises. People that would read it. One person said that this is like a Bible. I said, well, really, it is. If you think of the Greek word Bible, it's not a religious book, it has to
It's
do with the
a
knowledge. So
yes, a book of
another person would
knowledge.
say, Robert, I can't believe it. We came from the same part of Nebraska, and this book I relate with is exactly you're talking about me. That's the other person. So I said, wow, I didn't know I wrote a book like that. So I kept still look at it and read it again and go, oh my goodness, that poem I just gave you. I then began to analyze that poem and said, why, my goodness, that's deeper than I imagined. It's an
Yes,
iambic
it is.
pentameter. It has but in there. Life is but a mirror. It doesn't say life
Yes.
is a mirror. I said, holy mackerel. I put the but in there, which means it's like a mirage in the desert. It's just sort of a shadow. I go, wow, I didn't know I wrote all that. So I keep looking, well, how could I have written that and not know that much about myself? So that's been the biggest surprise.
Yeah, like you went through, yeah. Many authors face certain emotional or creative challenges while writing, like the one you just mentioned. You wrote it down and then you were surprised, right, Robert?
Yeah, exactly. I say, did I write that? Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. It was like my conscious wasn't aware of the self revelation of my inner wisdom until I look at it back. Say, well, did I really write that? Did I write
Yeah,
that?
that's amazing.
And then, as authors all do, we wondered, is that original? Is that, did I copy that from somewhere? And then I had to spend lots of research writing, why, by golly, there's nobody that's written that poem. Oh, really? I
Yeah.
wrote the poem?
It's really yours. So, Robert, what part of the story has a secret did you find the most challenging when you were writing?
Well, of course, you know that the cover, that was really a year-long bit of work of
The
what in the
cover.
world can I do that's going to represent that. So the cover was tough. Then the last chapter that I have written was incredibly complicated. So the last chapter 40 is one that really had me challenged to take everything in my life now and get it in one chapter, bring in all of psychology, bring in all my experiences, bring in a summary of my whole life. How in the world could I do that? Plus, how could I write a chapter that covers 6 billion people on this planet? So that's a hard chapter.
That's incredible. So, Robert, your book stands between a memoir, as you've mentioned, and a psychological guide. What do you feel differentiates The Story Has a Secret from other books in the same genre or category?
Well, I wish this weren't my understanding, but when people write biographies, they write
Mhm.
about events, third person, and they
Yes.
don't give us much self or any self disclosure. I thought, my goodness, I claim to be a therapist, a father, and my own daughter doesn't even know me very well. I need to write a book so people could understand me, including my daughter and family. So I said,
Okay.
wow, the whole point is to share yourself and pass it on to your friends. And that's why I say turn your memories into your memoir. And the reason it's therapeutic is it helps the author and others begin to understand themselves, and not just like they're preaching or teaching, but actually sharing how do they deal with everything in life. I said, my goodness, I'm a therapist, psychologist. How can I
Yeah.
write something that will reveal how I deal with everything instead of
Yes.
lecturing to somebody about how things should be? So that was the basic. And the story, in a short, is everyone should write a book, whether it's with pictures, whether it's writing, and then share those memories with your family and friends. They then become memoirs, and then the wisdom that's passed on for generations can happen. Otherwise, everybody starts over with an open book and nothing written inside of it. So
Yeah.
our society gets stuck because we forgot how knowledge was passed. It was through the written word and not the spoken word.
Yes,
So
I
just
definitely agree with that one.
so all you do is share your own memories with others, your friends, families, and then turn them into memoirs so that they represent your uh, receiving and giving back to the universe.
So, Robert, I see a comment here from Abigail Foster. Let me show it on the screen. Is the secret in a story more about the plot or about what it reveals to the reader personally?
Oh, I'm glad you asked that. I'll see if I can answer it. First, another spin off. If you
Mhm.
notice, then then I'll come back to that. The title, if you look at it, has in this book, this revised book, it has capital letters of every single word except a, an, or the.
Okay.
Okay, that tells us that the author meant this to be a book that's to be remembered with some
Mhm.
formality, and it's not very personal. Well, when the author, which is myself, when I wrote the first book, notice it says the story has a secret, but only the word "the" is capitalized. We said, well, why did the author do that? Well, the author did that because that author said, that's me, that is to be a introspective narrative of myself and make it more
Mhm.
intimate and more personal, leave off the capital letters. Now, let me see if I can have you rephrase that question a little bit because I spin off on that
Yeah.
side because I thought it was related, but just state that once more to make sure I didn't totally spin away from it. But I think it was in the direction, if you can recall that, send that question back again. Let me see what I might have missed.
Which question was
Uh,
it?
just gave me there. I was answering generally with the
Oh,
story
okay.
being capitalized and the letters not being capitalized because that's a major
All right.
component.
Yes,
Um,
it is.
in fact, in psychology, that not capitalized sentence is really profound. It
Mhm.
means that the it's the life story of the teller that has multiple meanings, and it's very introspective. Where the capitalized is just the publisher's word of this is to be a public landmark book. So I think that kind of quickly speaks to your question. If I missed it, just rephrase that for me a minute.
So, well, the viewer didn't comment anymore. So, Robert, now that we're about to wrap up the interview, can you tell the audience where they can get a copy of The Story Has a Secret?
Yes, that's good. There's many places, I'm proud to say. Amazon has one, Archway Publishing Company has another, Barnes and Noble has another, Thrift Books has another, and it's quite widely published. If you just put The Story Has a Secret on the internet, Robert Brehm, it's going to show all kinds of publishers that have this book, which I thought was overwhelming. I didn't know there were so many different
Many.
places.
Yeah.
And also, if you'll get back to Reader's Magnet, they're such a wonderful author and publisher that if you'll send them, I will personally send you a copy with my autograph on it. So I'll make sure you get the latest book
Oh,
and sent to you as a courtesy of Reader's Magnet.
thank you so much for that, Robert. And we're about to end this author interview session. So I'd like to ask you, do you have any final message to the viewers right now?
I think the final message is a simple one. Life is great,
Yes.
so be happy. And if that doesn't work, either call me and I'll go through the book gladly, or I'll help you in a therapeutic way master that concept because life is great and you should be happy. We just have to get into more depth on how does the therapist see we will do that with a journey, and does this therapist ever get trapped like we have the cliche doctor know thyself. Well, the same thing with a therapist. Am I able to really deal with you as an example, of me as example, that you can see how complex and easy life can be? But
Yes.
again, life is great, be happy.
So, Robert, thank you so much for being with us today. Your book offers a really thoughtful way to look at memory, personal experiences, and the deeper meaning behind life stories. So, everybody, that's a wrap on today's featured author interview. To our wonderful audience, thank you for tuning in here at the RM Hive. Be sure to check out The Story Has a Secret by Robert Brehm. He's holding a physical copy of the book right now. Can you show it again, Robert?
Yeah, just say this
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
again.
That.
Let
Yes.
Magnet know, and I'll send you a complimentary copy autographed.
Yes. And for those who want to know more about Robert, he has a website. It's right there on the screen, www.stressguru.com. All right.
Yes.
So this has been Brittany. And as we say it here in Reader's Magnet, we share your story with the world. Thank you, Robert. See you around,
Thank you.
everybody.
Okay. Bye now.